Hello and welcome to Rajya Sabha Television with me, Frank Pereira. India and the United Arab Emirates enjoy strong bonds of friendship based on age-old cultural and economic ties between the two nations. The relationship flourished after the accession of Sheikh Zayed bin Sultan Al Nahyan as the ruler of Abu Dhabi in 1966 and subsequently with the creation of the UAE Federation in 1971. Since then, both sides have made sincere efforts to improve relations in all fields. India-UAE bilateral relations have received impetus from time to time with exchange of high-level visits from both sides. The latest being Crown Prince His Excellency Sheikh Mohammed bin Zayed Al Nahyan's visit to India as the chief guest of the Republic Day celebrations. On this edition of The Big Picture, we'll take a look at the significance of the relations and bilateral ties between the two countries. Joining me on the program today are S.K. Jindal, Chairman, Investments and Capital Markets, ASSOCHAM, Professor A.K.Pasha, Director, Gulf Studies, JNU, Pramit Chaudhuri, Foreign Affairs Editor, Hindustan Times, and Pinak Ranjan Chakravarty, former Secretary, Ministry of External Affairs. Thank you so much, gentlemen, for joining me on this edition of The Big Picture. Ambassador, I'd like to start with you, of course, and if you could list out, the highlights really of this visit of the Crown Prince.
I think apart from the economic and other agreements that have been signed, there's over 14 agreements have been signed. But before I say something on that, let me also highlight the fact that the Prime Minister Modi's visit in August last year was the visit of an Indian Prime Minister after 34 years. So there was something that was missing in the sense that high-level visits when we talk about, no Indian Prime Minister had visited for 34 years. The last one to visit was Srimati Indira Gandhi. So that was something that was, clearly there was something not missing in the relationship. I think and Prime Minister Modi went and fixed it. Now, the geopolitical conditions were also ripe for this kind of an event. What with the rise of Daesh on the borders virtually of UAE and other factors, the low price of oil, and then the shift from an oil-based economy to a more service-oriented economy in Dubai particularly. All these factors and India's growing market, etc., and then also the growing feeling that the commitment of the United States to maintain security and etc. in the Gulf was somehow waning, and USA was not so much interested because oil was no longer a major commodity that the US imported. All these factors led to a realignment of interests, and fortunately I think that realignment led to a convergence of interest between India and the UAE.
Sure. Professor, as far as strategic location is concerned, how important is India to the UAE and how important is the UAE to, and vice versa, the other way around?
Yeah, UAE in the region, Gulf region and the broader Southwest Asian region has emerged as an important player for a number of reasons. One is its growing influence in the region through its policies, whether it is Yemen or Libya, Syria, and also the moderate policies which it has been pursuing. It is sandwiched between the big brother Saudi Arabia and the Shia neighbor Iran, and it has tried its best to maintain fairly good ties with both without antagonizing both. On this island issue on which Saudi Arabia wanted UAE to take the issue to the United Nations, which it has resisted, and on the nuclear deal with US and P5, it has taken a moderate stand. And on the several Saudi-Iranian differences, UAE has exerted fairly moderate policies on its larger neighbor. This is the UAE context. And also they don't subscribe to the idea of extremism and violence, terrorism, whether it is on the Arab-Israeli front or on other issues. As far as South Asia is concerned, one assumes that they are closer to Pakistan. But over the last couple of years, if you see the statements coming from the highest level, especially on Pakistan's refusal to send troops to Yemen and the anti-terrorism alliance which the Saudis formed, this UAE was extremely harsh. Of course, that has been toned down, but their friendship continues with their brotherly ties with Islamabad. But they are looking towards India in the larger context of South Asia, India's nuclear capability, economic power, and also China. And in the larger context of the American pivot towards Asia and the withdrawal syndrome, which you hear very often from the GCC neighbors. So in that context, I think UAE was looking towards India for quite some time.
Sure.
We are now matched. That is the moment we have seized. And this, I think, is a paradigm shift, because we are trying to balance by Modi's visit to Iran, Saudi Arabia, UAE, which needs to be sustained and extended to other GCC countries, because they are also equally important for our energy security, Indian workers, investments, and food security, and the larger peace and security in the region which we look forward to.
Indeed, indeed. You know, taking this issue of Pakistan forward, Pramit, you know, UAE, we all know, was inclined towards Pakistan, you know, in the 90s and even past that. But of late, we've seen that UAE has made overtures towards India, you know, starting with the Uri attack. You know, they condemned the Pathankot attack. Even after the Uri attack, UAE was the first Islamic state to condemn the Uri attack.
Correct.
So, you know, what has changed in the last few years?
Well, what's happened is that, as you said, the UAE at one point was not only very close to Pakistan, they were one of only 3 countries that supported the Taliban regime.
Yes.
Very clear in their view that Pakistan was their strategic ally, even if economically India may be more important. But if you look at the statements of the UAE and if you talk to their officials, over the past 2 or 3 years, they have become, ultimately they're a mercantile nation, they're a trading financial hub. They have become increasingly nervous and worried that their region is on the brink of, and is in fact getting itself stuck in this maelstrom of violence. And so among other things, they've begun to, for example, strongly finance and support moderate Islamic groups in their, for example, conferences, Sufi foundations are receiving money from the Abu Dhabi royal family in particular. And they've also distanced themselves from the Saudi Arabians, even though while they remain very close to them, especially the present reform faction that's in power in Riyadh. They've been relatively clear that Wahhabism, Salafism, Deobandis, these extreme schools and conservative schools are ones that they prefer, that they believe are destroying or wrecking the fabric of their region. The foreign minister, in fact, in his speech in the UNGA last year, very clearly said, look, our region is now facing the biggest threat since World War II, from the forces of extremism, and the UAE is going to try and bring back some degree of moderation. So despite they have territorial problems with Iran, they have supported the Iran-US deal because they want to bring Iran back into the mainstream of politics. They have actually fought a proxy war with Qatar in Libya to try to stop Islamist rebel groups there taking over in power. They have tried to set up they have supported rebels in Syria, but they've not supported the ones that Saudi Arabia, for example, has supported. They've been carefully trying to position themselves in different places across the Islamic and the Arab world in particular. And in Yemen is interesting because the one relationship they maintained for a while, they held on to, was Pakistan, because they had that belief that Pakistan was still their backstop. If all else failed, the Pakistani military would come into them their fight. And the Pakistani military failed that test in the Yemen war when Saudi Arabia and the UAE asked Pakistan to join them in intervening in what they saw as an Iranian Shia takeover. Pakistan said no. In that case, the UAE said, then what is the point of this relationship with you? Because as it is, we don't see you as being part of the Islamic strands that we wish to support. You no longer prefer to give us military support. And as Pinak has mentioned correctly, that the other problem was that economically, Abu Dhabi now is looking at Dubai and saying Dubai's future lies in becoming something like Singapore.
Indeed.
And therefore, India makes sense, while Pakistan is less relevant. And we already, our trade with the UAE is now almost 7 times greater than Pakistan's. So therefore, where does Pakistan fit into this picture? The answer is almost nowhere.
Nowhere, yes. And your losses are gained.
Exactly. And in every single case, India makes more sense. The only exception is on the military side.
Sure.
But what is interesting is when we've talked to the UAE officials and we say India is not interested in becoming a military power in the Gulf, they said yes, but look at it this way. As has been mentioned, America is now uncertain.
Sure.
Pakistan is useless. You are now the fastest growing military power in this region. That even without going into the Gulf, just by building 40 warships every 4 or 5 years, massively expanding, And the country that America is backing in this region is you. America is saying this is the country we want to replace us as we leave. So even if you may not want to become part of the Gulf power game now, maybe 10 years, 20 years down the line, it's logical for you to be there.
Indeed, you will have a role then.
Yeah.
Certainly. SK Jindal, let me bring you into the debate now, of course. And as far as, the industry is concerned, what are the key takeaways from this Crown Prince visit to India from the industry's point of view?
Key takeaways are these 14 new agreements, strengthening of relationship, new level of relationship. Now it has been elevated to the stage of comprehensive strategic partnership from simple bilateral ties. And these leaders, when they exchanged, when Mr. Modi went there and Mr. Mohammed came here earlier, and now all these visits, they strengthen and they make the relationship much stronger. Both sides need each other. It's a win-win relationship. And now the change in the global environment is people are looking for peace, positive environment, growth. They think that is the sustainable model. They don't want to associate with negativity or fighting, all those kind of things. They think that it is enough already. So trade and industry partnership and relationship and cooperation is they complement and they make it fulfill those kind of situations. Now, for example, we have got so many people who live there in 2.8 million people are living there.
Yes.
14 billion we are receiving as inwards from there, from these people who they send their earning back home. So all these things make this relationship very, very important. And as India is the fastest growing economy in the world now, so they need us as we need them. So it is complementary to each other that we are able to increase this relationship and make our presence felt together.
Indeed, indeed. Ambassador, from a trade perspective, India and the UAE are doing trade to the tune of $50 billion at the moment.
More, I think, a little more.
Yeah, certainly. But let's say $50 billion at the moment, And at a time when all these oil-rich countries are looking to diversify and, go beyond oil, how much sense does it make, to be dealing with one of the fastest growing economies in the world?
Well, it does make sense for the UAE because they also own large sovereign funds. And they have promised, I think one of the agreements has promised that they are going to invest in India. Their investments in India are not very impressive. I think probably under $4 billion. But they have now promised that they will put in at least $75 billion.
Yes.
And because of India's growing needs of infrastructure and other things, these are, there is a beautiful match between their funds which are lying maybe somewhere in a bank and to be utilized in some of these infrastructural projects, of which, of course, we have to work out the modalities. The history of their investment in India is not a happy one. There have been problems because they are more interested in having a steady source of income. That is, you park your money or you give your money to some entity and they get a kind of a fixed rate of return or something. That's the kind of way they look at it. But in a marketplace, sometimes that does not happen. So from the economic and commercial point of view, I think the UAE is already our largest trading partner in that region. And although oil is not such a big factor anymore, but still it is, I think, the 6th or the 7th the major oil supplier to India. And of course, our people who are there, who are working there, and they also realize that more or less the Indians who are working there are more or less the backbone of their economy. I mean, they work in almost all areas of the economy and sustaining that kind of capacity there. But I think the point about Dubai becoming Singapore is very relevant because I think they see themselves as Singapore of the West. Sure. And clearly our trade with Dubai, which is of the order of $50–60 billion, clearly it is not being consumed in Dubai. It's going all over the place. It's an entrepot trade, just like Singapore is. So I think trade that way is important because if the region settles down, Iran grows, comes out of coming out of sanctions, etc., a lot of demand will be created for goods and services, I must say. So that is an area where we can export more, both in goods and services. But the very important point that has now emerged is in the domain of security.
Sure.
I think defense and security is going to play a larger and larger role. Pramit said something about it, elaborated on that. And I think he's absolutely right. I think India is expected to become a net security provider. And I think the defense agreement that has been signed are the first steps towards that kind of a cooperation.
You know, talking about defense and cooperation, for the first time we saw Arab troops participating in Republic Day celebrations and were seen on Rajpath. Was there a message to the world from that?
Yes, it clearly is a very significant message that India is looking beyond the visit of Indian ships to these ports, which has been going on for quite some time. You know, when Manmohan Singh as Prime Minister visited Doha, Qatar's capital, and Oman, we signed defense cooperation agreement with these two Gulf states, GCC members. And immediately there was talk that, you know, we are upgrading our presence in the Gulf, our commitments have increased in the face of declining American presence and withdrawal syndrome and all that thing. So it goes one step ahead of all of these things, and I think the Gulf countries have been looking towards India for quite some time to increase its defense commitments, not just the port visits. So this is a very significant development, especially because these countries are monarchies, family-based ruling systems, and after the Arab Spring and turmoil in neighboring Bahrain and alleged Iranian efforts to destabilize the monarchy, and then, you know, from Libya, Egypt, Somalia, Yemen, Syria, all of this region is in turmoil, and the monarchies are feeling little nervous about the adverse developments, especially when hundreds and millions were mobilized to overthrow, you know, dictators like Mubarak and Gaddafi and Ali Abdullah Saleh and now Assad in Syria. So, and also they felt that America, instead of being on their side, has concluded along with other major powers a deal with Iran, you know, recognizing its military nuclear capabilities, if not eliminating, which they tried to promise. So in that way, they are sandwiched between the instability on the Arabian Peninsula and also the growing military capability of Iran. And in that sense, you know, that's what I pointed out. They were looking for Pakistan, and it's not forthcoming because of its own problems of terrorism, Afghan fallout, and also, you know, the kind of stability which India provides, political stability and the smooth growth in our economy, and also in the joint communique they have mentioned about inclusive growth and also welfare society, which both societies are trying to create, and also the moderate foreign policy and towards Islamic groups, you know, their criticism of the Ikhwan al-Muslimin in Egypt, for example, to take one example.
Sure.
So that is an important area where we converge between the two countries. So in that way, UAE is an important player in the region, and I think what needs to be sustained is at the highest level political relationship, although economically we have been strong partners. Another thing we have to keep in mind is, you know, they are of course looking for India as a major trading partner, investment destination, but their funds are all parked in the Western banks and Western financial institutions. And as their dependency syndrome or dependence for security is very strong still on the Europeans and Americans, you know, it will be too optimistic on our part that they will immediately invest 75 billion, or the Saudis would use their sovereign wealth fund, you know, because Dr. Anwar Gargash, the ministers, UAE minister, you know, when he gave a press conference, he was putting much more harsher conditions than what we expected from IMF.
Sure.
So in that way, they are looking for ironclad guarantees for their investments.
Indeed.
So we have to water down our expectations of what these Gulf countries may or may not do in terms of investment. But trade, I think that is promising as long as they remain an important export destination.
Sure, indeed. But another aspect that was, you know, spoken about widely was that of terrorism, and we saw that for the first time UAE diplomats were targeted in Afghanistan, and, you know, 5 of them were killed as well. So terror too is a big problem as far as both India and the UAE are concerned.
Yeah. Well, the UAE is prime, and again, I go back to the UN speech that was made. The foreign minister of the UAE actually said, he said, Al-Qaeda, Daesh, or the Islamic State, Hezbollah, Anwar Islam, all of these groups, he cited them one by one as sources of a concern. The biggest concern is obviously the Islamic State and the potential for the Islamic State. I mean, it doesn't take more than a few terrorist attacks to destroy the ability of a financial hub or trading hub to be destroyed as a safe haven for that kind of thing. So that has been obviously at the forefront of their concerns. And the fact that Sunni Islam is developing more and more fringe elements are becoming more and more powerful within the larger format of Arab Sunni Islam. So that has always been a concern. As I've mentioned, Pakistan therefore is a country that they see as a country of concern, or at least not a country that is supportive of what they would like to see in the larger Islamic world. So in Afghanistan is interesting because we're still not completely clear who carried out the attack.
But then there are reports that suggest that ISI's hand on a Haqqani network.
If it is the Haqqani network, then almost certainly the ISI is responsible. In which case we're actually seeing a message from Pakistan to the UAE as to be careful how far you go with India. Some reports say just Al-Qaeda, but we don't know yet but the sense is that yes, they've been receiving a warning from Pakistan about how far they should go in the relationship. And noticeably the Taliban were very quick, and I think twice said that we had nothing to do with this attack. We have never had any problems with the United Arab Emirates. The Emirati are our friends. So it seems to be, I think, just by process of elimination that Pakistan's hand was involved in this. So yes, terrorism therefore has come again, I think, was going to be part of it. And it was one of the preconditions that Modi set before he went last year. That it was Abu Dhabi royal family that approached India and said, why doesn't the Prime Minister come and meet us? And India's response was basically, well, maybe one day, but right now you're not a priority because of your relationship with Pakistan. And Abu Dhabi said, that's changing. And let's talk about this. So you saw Ajit Doval, the NSA, visit a number of times before the Prime Minister did and say, look, this is our problem. Dawood Ibrahim has a safe haven in Dubai. This is what you do with Pakistan. And Abu Dhabi said, no problem. Dawood is no longer going to be allowed to stay here. If you know of assets, we gave a list of assets that we believed were Dawood's, and they said those will be seized or blocked. So the whole host of fronts, and then as you mentioned, they've publicly come out very strongly against attacks that have originated from Pakistan against India, terrorist attacks or line of control incidents. So they've been very clear across the board that your terrorism, your concerns about terrorism coming out of Pakistan, and our concerns about terrorism coming out of the West Asian area are effectively the same. And this is something, of course, that India has been trying to sell across the world. So for us, it's a perfect match. And if Dubai, which has always been in many ways a safe haven for terrorism finance, they just basically said, we don't care where the money comes from, that's not our question. If that is shut down, for that type of finance, then automatically it's very useful for India.
Sure. Yes, Professor, you wanted to make a point.
I just wanted to add one point. You know, when Elke Anwar Advani as Home Minister visited UAE and signed the extradition treaty, they have been cooperating with us, over the long period of time on terrorism, and they have deported many people, so on and so forth. But what we have to keep in mind is, their extensive support or agreeing with India on terrorism and intelligence and security cooperation should not give the impression that they have abandoned Pakistan as a military player. Much of the military equipment which they procure is from America and Britain and France, and Pakistan also gets similar equipment. And the Pakistani military advisors are there for training the UAE forces for a long time.
Indeed.
And in the ultimate resort, actually the Zayed family is divided between one faction wants very strong relations, including security with India. But there is also an equally strong faction which favors Pakistan as a long-term security partner, and they look towards Pakistan for any eventual help if there is threat to the ruling family there.
Sure. Yeah. Now, final comments from all my guests now, looking forward and what to expect. Mr. Jindal, as far as trade and economic ties between the two countries are concerned, how do we take it a step further?
You see, this is a step in that direction only. Meeting in 1 year, I see these 3 meetings happening in a short period. And there is a lot of potential which exists between our countries that we can do for each other and together. Lot of potential. Plan is to increase this business also of 50 billion by 60% in the next 5 years. This is what is being discussed now. And all good and strong relationships they help is that they support all aspects of our relationship. Let it be security, let it be terrorism or anything which we have to work together upon. And as I look at, ease of doing business over there is attracting Indian businesses also to work together. 14 billion which we are receiving every year from there as inwards is because there are a lot of opportunities we get from employment also for our people who go and work there, which supports them also, but which supports us also. So all these things are mutually beneficial. We are sharing our mutual strengths, we are sharing the best practices, and this will make it grow because the potential is so much, so this can happen. So we just need to work in this direction.
Sure. And Ambassador, a quick closing comment from you. Have you found a strong ally in the region? How do we keep this relationship going and take it to the next level?
Well, I wouldn't call them an ally yet, but certainly, as we say, comprehensive strategic partnership, which we have in many countries. But that's an indicator in the sense that we have taken the first step. It would become a good alliance if we were able to, for example, get into more defense training and supplies. We build ships, so I don't see any harm in selling warships to the UAE, provided they are able to. And when you sell a warship, you have to sell a whole package,
Sure.
training, etc. I think when we get there, that would be the real test of our relationship in terms of a strategic one. I mean, but we have an economic strategic partnership that is already there and flourishing. And if the UAE in return invests in India, in Indian infrastructure and big projects, then I think we have really made progress.
Professor, the Indian diaspora has contributed immensely in the relationship as it stands right now. What can they do to take it further?
Well, they can do much more in the sense, from the last count I made, there are about over 50 multi-billionaires, Indians.
Correct.
I mean, they have made huge fortune over the last 50 years or so, and if India welcomes their investment in a big way,
Right.
apart from the UAE Sovereign Wealth Fund, it can go a long way
Sure.
in helping our infrastructure. And that needs political dynamism, intervention at the highest political level, not like visiting after 30 or 34 years.
Indeed.
It needs to be nurtured, sustained, and kept at the highest level, as the Western countries do. For every small deal, the British Prime Minister is there.
Pramit, a quick closing comment from you. I'm out of time.
Yeah, basically, quickly just saying that Abu Dhabi has also, remember, also opened up relations with China. Their other mutuals, their other sovereign wealth fund has set up a $10 billion joint venture with the Chinese government and has opened up an office in Hong Kong last October. So Abu Dhabi is also hedging its strategies across the world, as we are, because Modi has visited 4 countries in the Persian Gulf so far. And they've also committed, some of them have committed money in defense. So both of us are hedging to see how it works, but right now, by this trip and what we've signed and what we've discussed, the strongest degree of convergence for each of us is with each other rather than with other countries that we're looking at.
All right. On that note, I'll have to call it a wrap on this edition of The Big Picture. Professor A.K.Pasha, Pramit Pal, Chaudhuri, Pinak, Ranjan, Chakravarty, and S.K. Jindal, thank you so much, gentlemen, for joining me on the program and putting things into perspective for us. That's all the time we have. Thank you for watching.